Energy expert at Imperial College London, Malcolm Grimston. Malcolm, thank you so much for joining me. I mean, we know that there are preppers in this country. We always think it's an American thing, but the United Kingdom has plenty of its own homegrown preppers who are stocking up, even as I speak, on loo paper and tins of baked beans and all this sort of a thing, up against the coming of Armageddon or some kind of terrifying explosion. I don't know what they're doing it for, but you will tell me whether Oliver Dowdon is needlessly frightening people or if you agree with what he says. Get the candles, the torches and the battery-operated radios in.
Well, I think it's common sense, really. I'm sure you're not old enough to remember the last real round of power cuts. I certainly just about am in the
Oh, I do. I'm old
70s.
enough. I remember it. I was born in 1962.
Okay.
I mean, I was a child and we loved every second of it. I remember my mother with the Calagas ring, the paraffin lamp. It was marvellous because it meant you could tell your teacher you couldn't do your homework. You also didn't have to have a bath, which as a child was blissful. I mean, I remember as a child it was fantastic. Obviously, the parents hated it and the grandparents even worse.
Yes, I mean, and I have similar memories. But back in that day, electronics was a much, much smaller part of our world. And people would would have a few candles around, perhaps a few batteries. We are now so much more dependent on reliable supplies of electricity for our electronics, for our lighting, for our communications, obviously the whole phone network and everything. And from time to time, rightly, the government refreshes the risk register. And alongside the kind of obvious ones like another pandemic or the possibility of AI, which has come onto the radar, and climate change, it is just recognizing that if we did face a power cut, let's say because of a cyber attack, which was completely, who would talk about cyber attacks back in '74 with the last major round of cuts, or indeed attacking underwater cables, then if we found ourselves without electricity for prolonged periods, which any government should be looking at risks like this, even if they deem them to be quite unlikely, then I think it's quite right that we should just make sure that we are resilient, is the phrase being used for this, that we have these things around the house that we can rely on when we need them. And so from that point of view, I don't think it's scaremongering. It's common sense of being ready for things that we hope will never happen, probably won't happen. But it's a fairly small price to pay for us to be ready for them.
I think once you start, though, getting ready, there's almost no limit to the number of items you ought to purchase, to the number of ways in which you ought to be able to hunker down in some bunker to keep yourself going. Because obviously, if there is cyber warfare or whatever it is, you don't know how long it's going to last. You don't know how many tins of beans to buy. And as I was hearing people saying today, and as they say in America, one of the things Americans do is make sure they're thoroughly armed with weapons to stop other people coming to steal their toilet paper and baked beans, which we definitely don't want to do over here. So how prepared do we really need to be? I mean, one box of candles, a box of matches isn't going to cut it, is it?
I mean, at the moment, we do face power cuts now and again because the local substation goes down. They're usually a matter of hours, and we can get fast on that. But candles don't go off. You can store them for years. I'm sure I've got a few around from 1974. The space they take up, just having them there. Batteries, you need to keep them either charged up if they're rechargeable or replaced from time to time. But it's not an enormous burden. And of course, if there were a major event, we'd want as individuals to have news about it. We want to be able to hear about what's going on. This is where the battery-powered radios come into the picture. That I think the Deputy Prime Minister is quite right, that I certainly get most of my news now from the web or from streamed services or whatever, and have become very, very reliant on that. And I'm not sure that, those clearly wouldn't be working in a major power cut situation. And you need to be sure you can get the information that will help you to judge what you should be doing to protect yourselves in these cases. But it's like any insurance policy. At the end of a year, you might think, well, that was a waste of time. I haven't crashed the car and nobody's robbed my house or whatever. But we still have them because the relatively low likelihood, but extremely high consequent risks do need to be managed. And I think the Deputy Prime Minister is just taking a very simple, pragmatic approach.
And Malcolm, my final question, of all the potential risks, the cutting of the underwater cables, the cyber warfare or whatever else, which is the one that gives you most cause for nightmares and disturbs you in the middle of the night? Which is the thing you think most likely to happen?
Well, I do worry about cyber attacks. I do worry about the consequences and the potential now in the world. Many countries are now really looking at the future of warfare as being cyber warfare rather than military in a number of circumstances. And that's a bit of an arms race in its own way. You're always trying to build up defences, but the other side, the side that's trying to do you down, will always have new techniques. So that's a battle that you've always got to have in mind, and you're never going to win. You can only, in the best possible worlds, keep up with the issues. And that's one that I must say, because it could well involve state actors, is quite serious. But we've seen from the Ukraine situation, sadly, that we are quite vulnerable. You know, the livelihoods of many people have been very severely affected through a traditional, if I can put it that way.
Well, I'm going to stop you right there, and we're going to finish the item by saying don't panic under any circumstances, which of course makes people feel consumed with panic. We know that. Malcolm, thank you very much indeed for joining me.